Welcome back, folks.
Elijah.
Hi, everybody. We are going to wait just a second here. I'm not sure how or what just happened, but I think everybody in all the breakout rooms got kicked out. And so we're welcoming everybody back. This is one of those things that would have been much easier to do in a community meeting at a school with posters and people walking around to talk. So I appreciate everybody's patience with trying to get 800 people in breakout rooms and all this working. So thank you for understanding. I'm going to wait just a second or two to see how it all shakes out. Andrew and Isaac, are you back in here?
Yeah.
I am. Yep.
Okay.
I found my way home.
You know how to change
All
your
right. I believe everything should be saved before. I think after this meeting, I get an email with all the comments that were in the chat already. So
football. I live for football. You know, live for sports. I'm sure
So in case you're in a different group than you were earlier, my name's Elisa Shore. I'm the senior director with high schools here for Portland. And I've been part of the Guiding Coalition. And with me in this room, Andrew and Isaac, do you want to just quickly say hi? Because I do see some new names in here.
Hey, y'all. I'm Isaac Cardone. I'm an area senior director supporting the Grant and Wilson clusters, and I was previously a principal in the Madison cluster. My role tonight is just to take notes, and if there are any unanswered questions, make sure I capture those.
Hi, my name is Andrew Harvey. I'm a member of the Southeast Guiding Coalition. I have a child in school here, and I'm representing Franklin High School, and looking forward to hearing your questions and ideas.
All right. So as we get started tonight, we're asking that people speak and listen respectfully, share the airtime and chat space so multiple perspectives can be heard. Expect non-closure. This one, I'm going to make sure I've muted everybody here. Hold on just a sec. Okay, expect non-closure tonight. So what we have before you is by no means what the final plan will look like. And so really our hope today was to put an idea out there based on our Thursday meetings that we've had up until this point and use it as a place to get feedback. So based on what we hear tonight, through this process, through the comments, through the chat comments, and through the survey, we will use that to continue to refine the proposal that goes to the board in January. So we will, what you looked at in the presentation earlier and what's on the website is by no means what we will end up with. So we really do want to hear from families about how this all works and how people feel about it. We will also continue to seek feedback. So as we hear from people today, we go back and look at it and make changes. We will continue to push what we're thinking out to the community to hear back from families on what works and what doesn't work. So as we discuss things today, we will be using the chat a lot just because there are, I think, 100 people in here right now. So feel free to put your comment in the chat. And then we're going to start sort of with some questions about the proposal and then go into time for feedback. And I just ask for people's patience again with so many people in a room. It'll just take us some time. And I'd ask people to also share the airspace. So if you've spoken, it's a good idea to maybe let it hear from another school or things like that as well. So. With that, we want to start with questions that people have, and we'll do our best to try to answer them as we go.
Do you want the questions on the chat, or you want them talk, or
either way? And I will remind people, just because we got kicked off, we are recording these sessions. So feel free to ask the question.
Elisa, there's some topics, or a theme I'm seeing is the Northeast schools not being included in the current boundary changes, or even in the Southeast Guiding Coalition work currently.
Uh-oh.
I
Hello?
think-
Oh, sorry. Am I allowed to talk? I can't
No,
hear
yes,
her, but
say
I
yes.
can't hear. Oh. Elisa, were you saying something? I can't hear you if you're trying to speak. Okay. I've just posted in the chat. I mean, I have a lot of different concerns. I'm a Glencoe, Franklin, Mount Tabor parent. And one of many is that the proposal to move Glencoe and Mount Tabor kids, funnel them to Madison. First of all, it doesn't seem to actually, relieve any overcrowding for Franklin. By 2024, it's going to be, we're still going to be at or above capacity. So I just don't understand how that's actually helping overcrowding or filling a building that is already, we already have, it's just basically going to be the same problem, the same status. So what's the point of that?
Elisa,
Amanda Burr.
Elisa, your mic does not seem to be working. You're not
Elisa,
muted.
you're
You're not muted, but we can't hear you.
I think I can go ahead and answer that to keep things moving. Is you're right. It is not the plan is not solid. It is what I think is feedback is required. The goal is certainly to reduce overcrowding at Franklin, as well as the overcrowding at Bridger and the overcrowding at Mount Tabor. Quite frankly, maybe the changes that you're seeing that you aren't resonating with you may be something that is not what you would prefer to see. And those are the comments I think that we're looking for here.
All right, let's hope my sound works. Thank you, Andrew, for jumping in. Is that good?
Yes.
People hear me? Okay.
I can hear you.
And I think the other piece is that this is a multi-step process. So what we're looking at right now is the first phase to really get Kellogg open. And we would continue to take on some of those other challenges, as they mentioned, in the second phase.
Right, but as I understand it, the feeder changes that are being decided in phase one actually will have an impact on our schools in phase two. So the fact that we have not been a part of this conversation, our communities, Glencoe was not even at the table at the coalition, and my child who is at Glencoe will be affected by the decisions of how you feed into Kellogg. I am not, of course, opposed to anything regarding Kellogg becoming, being, a school that is clearly in need of opening, but it's the process and the exclusion of people in our communities and other communities, frankly, because one of the things that we've been thinking about is the feeder changes are actually boundary changes. Let's just be honest about it. When you change a feeder path, it's just as much a boundary change as anything else because it changes where the children go to school. So I just want to state really plainly that you talk about feeder pathways, you're talking about boundaries. It's just a different nomenclature. So to me, I am concerned that this is being fast tracked and that potentially the kids in this neighborhood can't walk to their neighborhood schools, which PPS seems to really feel is an important part of being at a school, is walkability and exercise and the health of being in your own community. So a lot of concerns over here.
And I can
I
add
agree.
to that too, because yesterday one of the parents actually brought up the point of, when the Republicans trying to go after certain groups, will trying to do anything to challenge that. and to make them struggle. I mean, to me, it seems like they're trying to divide the schools, especially the kids. They're trying to segregate the kids. Uh, you guys might want to call it differently, but that's just what it is. I mean, let's be honest.
And I have to say that I'm a Glencoe parent myself, and not having a seat at the table for any of this where it directly affects my student is not kosher. Because I feel like as a taxpayer, I don't have a say in any of these decisions.
I have concerns that we're moving kids to a Northeast school, but we haven't even talked about what's going to happen with Northeast feeder schools and Grant, for example. And I feel like it's just another time where Laurelhurst, Alameda, Grant, all of those areas get saved, and those of us who live right by a school and pay a ton in property taxes get no say in what happens with our kids. And I'm not saying we shouldn't try to balance, enrollment and equity and things like that, but I feel like our kids are being kicked out of Southeast. And my kid's a Mount Tabor kid, but he went to Glencoe, and like everyone else says, no one even talked to us. We found out at the last minute. We found out about this last week, basically. And I know you've been having meetings, but we're in the middle of a pandemic and everybody's homeschooling and trying to work. And it feels like it's being fast tracked when people aren't paying attention. And it's I don't know. I just feel like we're being kicked out of Southeast.
Let's call it what it is. They're fast tracking this so people don't notice. Let's just call it. If they don't want to call it that, that's what it is. And that's why I said, is PPS gonna make this public? Because if not, we're gonna make it public.
Here, here.
Thanks, Stephanie. Hey, I'd like to chime in really quick. I'm also a Glencoe parent. I have a child at Franklin and a child who will be at Mount Tabor next year. And I guess just kind of backing up from everything that everybody's been saying. I mean, I feel like there's just, obviously there's 112 people in this chat. There's going to be a lot of viewpoints. It's a hard process. And obviously these things need to be dealt with. They can't be kicked down the road. At the same time, I feel like with what's been happening this year, with the pandemic, with people having their work lives drastically changed, working from home, distance learning, juggling a lot of different roles, just all the stuff, not to even mention the political unrest and, just like political anxiety, I think, that people have been dealing with this year. People haven't really, I would say, I would guess Glencoe has 500 students and Mount Tabor has 700 students. It's not really been on people's radar. So I think if there's any, I would just like to put in the comment that if there's any sentiment that, Glencoe and Mount Tabor communities have not been interested or involved in this topic, I think it's just we didn't know about it. Honestly, I've been seeing the emails about Kellogg, about DLI. We don't have dual language immersion at my school. I think when my kids were really little, I applied for it because I thought it'd be really great for them. We didn't get in. I accepted it. I was, I'm like, I'm going to go to my neighborhood school, which is Glencoe. And actually, we've been really happy there. It's really been a great experience. But, it's just not been on our radar to look at these complexities of what's happening with the dual immersion schools and programs that we just don't have access to. So, no one's really been going to these Thursday night meetings. So we just didn't know what was going on until now. So, if it feels like a lot of people are kind of just jumping in, I think that's why. I think people just haven't been aware. And we're all having to come up to speed on all of these issues of other schools and programs that we've, not been involved in and don't benefit from. And again, equity is, it's obviously, it's so important and it's got to be front and center. But to just learn like what all the issues are of like why schools are moving around and why these programs, I'm even having to learn the terminology of what is co-location and what are all these acronyms. And, it's a lot to handle. And so I just want to start from the very beginning of where like a lot of parents who maybe not even on Zoom, who don't even have the bandwidth to get on, some of these calls might even be at. So, there's all these topics and I know we're going to get to them and there's a lot of discussion, but you guys are talking about putting forth a proposal in 1 month. I read December 17th and I was like, whoa, I'm just trying to like page through like 1 million hours of calls and like PowerPoints and all this stuff. So that's where I am as a parent. Thanks for the time.
I feel the same exact way. I'm not a parent yet of a child in school. He's supposed to start school at Atkinson in the fall as a kindergartner. And I know that the parents in my neighborhood feel the same way. We found out about this 3 days ago. We don't, we're not on any like school news feeds. We don't follow that. But I do feel like our voice is just as important as people who are currently in the school. And it just feels like we've sort of been blindsided with this big, huge decision that, will make our kids who live 3 blocks from school all of a sudden bust across town to a totally different neighborhood, or we have to drive, there's just so many things that don't make sense about any of it. And there's a ton of people in my neighborhood we found out in the past 3 days who have no idea that any of this is even going on. So, and we have internet access and we have we're native English speakers, and I just feel like there's a lot of people out there who don't have that benefit, who are also probably feeling either totally out of the loop or really floundering right now too. So it feels really rushed, and it also feels like a lot of it doesn't make sense. If walkability is a factor, all that, like keeping neighborhoods, I think is really important. So, and it feels like that's kind of all blowing up in a lot of different areas of Southeast right now with these plans.
I agree entirely with the previous speaker, the previous few speakers. Our son recently graduated from Franklin High School. We're surrounded by families where kids have come up through the neighborhood anticipating going to Franklin. The AP classes, the other classes, the theater, the culinary stuff, the running. We had our son go in Old Franklin for a year, then for 2 years get relocated to Marshall, and then graduate at the new Franklin. And I think the community overall thought that was, part of, the plan was to, we sacrifice a little bit. You send your kids away for a couple of years. They can then have a new school that turns out was undersized almost from day one. And to hear this, that kids who are walking 5 minutes to school now to Franklin are going to need to take 1 or 2 buses, a 45-minute bus ride out of the community does not engender community spirit. I think we can all agree that strong schools build strong community. And part of that, is having a nearby school. I don't understand how this is going to increase the health and well-being of communities. I think it's and definitely rushed. And Elisa, I know you were saying earlier in your presentation that nothing is firm yet, but I think of the 3 options being considered, all of them have kids from Tabor go out to Madison. So it's not a dialogue. You're presenting options with a very short decision-making time. And it's really just I'm really unhappy about the process and where you all have arrived at this point.
And then I also have to say that one of the deciding factors of why we bought the home where we did was because of the feeder pattern from Glencoe to Tabor to to Franklin, and to have that rug pulled out from under us all of a sudden is very, very disconcerting. And I can't be the only one in this position.
Hi, I'm from Woodstock, and in the Mandarin immersion program. And, and there are 2 strands right there right now at Woodstock. And, half are neighborhood kids and then half are lotteried in native speakers. And there are a lot of diversity within the school. And I believe, the neighborhood program, they actually enjoy the diversity. And I cannot see how you can have diversity when you have 2 strands from Woodstock, 1 strand from Harrison Park move into Bridger. So where's your diversity at? And even talking to the parents, the Woodstock parents, most likely half of them will end up pulling out their kids due to transportation issues, because once the family knew that they got into Woodstock, guess what? They end up purchasing homes in the neighborhoods because it's closer for them. They have neighborhood friends. So, when you split out schools to go into different paths, what you end up doing is you're disrupting the children's friendships too. Friendships that they build from grade school, middle school to high school. Each time they move schools, they will know less and less people because of where they're going. So, wouldn't we want to put the safety of our children and their mentality to, each time when they grow into a different school, they know their friends, and not knowing, it's going to be a bigger school, so they're going to know a certain group of kids. You don't want them to know less kids as they're going through each level of school. For me, Woodstock Mandarin immersion program was a 20-year successful program. And here, in 2021, you're going to pull that successful program where the rest of America was really like modeling their dual language programs based off of Woodstock. So, I think the coalition needs to really think hard about why are you going to disrupt something that was successful and that other schools model after. For what? What is the purpose? Because you want diversity, which you're not going to get when you put all the children into one school.
Yeah. I'd like to echo what Rebecca's saying. Also a parent at Woodstock. We have a child in neighborhood and also in the Mandarin immersion program, both of which are very well run. The school in general has been very successful for both of our children. I echo a lot of the concerns that she has. I don't understand how it improves diversity to remove diversity from our school. Furthermore, one of the issues that was brought up in the discussion was the issue about having these collated programs in schools. And I understand what you're doing by consolidating those programs at the elementary level might remove what seems to be a concern for PPS, but is clearly not a concern for parents. But it fails to do so at the middle school or at the high school level. And you can see that clearly from the paths you guys have put forward. So if that is an important goal, then why are you chasing it only at the elementary school level? And what is the purpose of that? Moreover, a major concern that many Woodstock parents have as well is that if you remove the Mandarin immersion program from Woodstock, not only do we lose diversity and lose a 20-year program that's been very successful, but we also run into a problem where we have now an elementary school with 30% enrollment. And what is the next step plan for Woodstock at that point? Is that a school that is being closed? Are boundaries being changed? What is the ultimate goal for a school that loses the heart of what makes it what it is right now? Thank you.
I don't know if this has been addressed already, but I just want to ask the question about the representation on the committee. I know that Glencoe wasn't represented on the committee. I know that Glencoe's impacted by any of the scenarios. I also want to just say that what I understand is there's one youth on the committee. And when you have one individual intended to represent thousands of voices, it seems to me to be an unfair task to put on that one individual. And especially when PPS espouses to have a really high priority around youth voice in decisions that impact them, there really has to be an opportunity for youth to be engaged in this process. And I think finally, having accelerated a process in response to a pandemic makes sense. Accelerating the outcomes of the process while we're still in a pandemic, when people are still struggling, when people are unemployed, when people are learning how to do school from home, and to compress this process into 2 months with, and expecting us, when I came in, somebody was talking about how much data and information there was to catch up on it. Seems to be a really high bar to ask us to engage in. And I think that I'll just stop there.
I have a question about the foreign language programs. We're an English speaking household. My child's not enrolled in an immersion program, but if I'm reading the information right, and forgive me because like people are saying we're trying to catch up at the last minute. If I'm reading the information right, one of the goals is to put those programs closer to the native speaking communities. And I know that there's a couple of trains of thought on what's best for those kids, but I wonder, is it really just segregating them away from the rest of the community? And is that really equitable? I don't know. I don't know the answer. My kid's not involved in that, but if you put all of this, all of the foreign languages in the native speaking communities, when are they going to integrate with the rest of us? So just a question. I don't know what the answer is, but it seems.
I can speak on that too.
Okay.
Because, my kids go to Bridger. I live about 2 blocks away from Lens, and I choose not to go to Lens because it was underrated. So we decided to drive to Bridger to take the kids over there because the program is great. I agree with Angela. The program that Bridger has is great. They have Hispanics and English speaking, and they help each other. That's actually been proven that when you have native speakers and English speakers on the same class, they help each other. Especially like my son, he's been almost tutoring since day one. The other kids are falling behind. So what's the point of them just taking all the Spanish kids in one end? I don't care where it is. It could be North Portland, East Portland. It don't matter. It sounds like they're segregating the kids. Instead of helping, they're gonna actually make it worse. We had parents talking to us saying, please, when this pandemic gets done, please invite us to your house so my kid can speak better Spanish.
I think there's a good point to be made
the main
too,
question
that-
here is, and I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No,
The main
it's okay.
question is,
Go ahead.
who's making these decisions? Do they have kids on the schoolings? Who's making these decisions?
I think we also have to think about the Lent neighborhood. By putting all of Spanish immersion at Lent, we are pushing the Lent neighborhood across 205 to go to elementary school. We're talking about I'm a parent at Atkinson, and I see the division of South Tabor into 4 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, in which kids will cross many major roadways to get to an elementary school or a middle school. Lent is being forced, the Lent neighborhood is being forced to cross 205 now to go to an elementary school, to go to their now neighborhood school. We've disregarded particularly our historically underserved communities, our Latinx community, our socioeconomically disadvantaged communities. We are ignoring them and instead segregating them, pushing them far out. Seems like this proposal is trying to solve gentrification in Portland with boundary changes, and that can't be done. That's a systemic problem that we certainly need to address as a society, but these boundary shifts aren't going to do it, and segregation certainly isn't going to solve that problem.
We're not even talking about the homeless problems that's near Lens, which it is. We're not talking about other problems that are near the Lens and these other schools.
I was looking at the, I was up really late last night looking at the maps and the distributions of populations that the committee has on their website. that they're supposedly using for this. And if you look at it, it's like, yeah, there's a concentration of there's a concentration of Chinese speaking households with students in DLI or students in PPS near Bridger, but that's it. There's a really heavy concentration of Vietnamese students in the same area, but there's no Vietnamese DLI going into that area. They're going to have to go all the way up to Northeast. The Spanish-speaking households are really evenly spread out through the eastern half of the Southeast region in their map, and it's about twice as big as the Chinese group, and it's actually bigger than the Chinese, Russian, and Japanese programs combined. But that entire group is being condensed into one spot at the far corner of the school. The Russian program isn't moving; they're staying co-located, because apparently having the Russian program co-located isn't a problem for anyone. It's just the Spanish and the Chinese ones.
If I may jump in, I have my kids have gone through CSS, and Franklin is our current high school. One of the things that I'm not really understanding about this plan, and I think the area that I'm getting most concerned with, is that it's moving forth under this umbrella terminology of equity. And the idea that equity needs to be addressed in this district could not be more important. It is such an important concept, but we're talking about it and thinking that the solution to the problem is to close schools that are functional. We're saying, here are things that are working, and it's not fair for other groups of people. And that is true. But instead of closing the programs, we need to be focusing on how do we integrate those elements into the other schools. Instead of thinking, let's close the school that's working, right? That's what I don't understand. And it seems that decisions are being made and the justification for it is to say, equity. Yes, we all understand equity. I mean, we're Portlanders. We know that. We fight for that, right? But we fight for that by actually addressing equity, and integrating what is successful, not just going, well, this isn't fair for other groups, so let's just can the entire thing. That's my concern, right? And the cost of that is that we have families who have created community going to be destroying those communities by saying, okay, that kid now has to walk 3 miles to school across 4 major intersections. That's a concern. And it seems like that is not being addressed. And until that's addressed, this conversation should freeze. And that's my input. I'm sorry, I'm done.
Can I piggyback on that one? I know I'm also a creative science parent, and the school model is based on constructivism, which is I believe, the most equitable way to teach to all students' abilities. And so I know that there's a strong desire in the creative science community to keep us as a K-8 because we're a close-knit community. But I was wondering if there was a way to grow creative science and incorporate the neighborhood kids, like possibly using the Clark School as a K through 4th, maybe, and then Harrison Park as a 5 through 8, because it would transform the way that students learn, I promise. I mean, if that's something that was ever considered or could be considered.
Just to respond to some of the comments around what Clark School is. So creative science is a thematic focus option in what used to be called Clark Elementary School. So that's the terminology people are hearing, just so people understand that. I really appreciate everyone's perspective. We're doing our best to keep up with the notes. I wanted to give a second to Andrew as a parent who's been part of this. Andrew, is there anything you want to jump in for a second? Don't feel you have to either.
Well, what I would like to say as a coalition member and hearing the frustration that everyone has with the work that was presented tonight is, I get it. These are conversations that many, if not the majority of coalition members are expressing. I think that as one of the constant themes in the coalition is the speed at which this is happening is too fast. We are lacking input from parents. We are lacking input, and we're lacking the why to why some of these things are happening. I believe in the packet that you saw tonight that there was a note saying there was not agreement among the coalition on the proposal that was put forward. And there wasn't. And this is very illustrative of the process that we in the coalition have been dealing with. We feel like voices from communities and underserved communities, especially communities that aren't native English speakers, are not part of this process. And there's been effort by coalition members as individuals to get that input. And now things are being translated, and hopefully we will see some feedback when we get back. But it is an incredibly frustrating process. And I feel the frustration and pain that you all are talking about. We heard that the Lent community did not want to have all Spanish immersion. So we also heard that the Chinese community didn't want to all come to Bridger and enjoyed the program at Woodstock. We heard that Atkinson has a great program. We've heard from teachers at Atkinson that are perfectly comfortable with those programs. So I think that the main thing that we need to do tonight is encourage you to enter your thinking into some of the forums that are online. We're trying to capture it in chat and to stay with it, because quite frankly, as a coalition member, we need all the community support and input and advocacy that we can get to do the right thing.
Can I just want to jump in and express a concern that my understanding is that in 2 months, we went from 11 proposals to 1. And we haven't seen the rationale that helped lead us from 11 to 1. And the conversation is actually now being centered in response to a single proposal without us having the opportunity to understand what the winnowing process was. And my concern is that the process moves forward from this place based on this conversation and these comments in the context of a single proposal, that people do not have adequate time to understand how we got to this place. People haven't been involved. People don't understand the metrics. I don't understand the bright line between what the proposal is and what the outcomes are. And I think that really needs to be articulated much better. And my real concern is that we will move forward from this place with a single proposal without having the chance to take a step back and look at the work that was done previously. Because the presentation tonight did not go through that process. We really need to be able to see that.
I agree, and I would just say that neither have we. And everything changes on a weekly basis. We are getting maps and information. Sometimes it's happened as hours as before meetings. We haven't had a process of thoughtful analysis. We haven't had a process of what's the best thing I can say? Quality control or review. So it's moving very fast, and it's very difficult to do good work when you're moving fast and when you're hitting guidelines. One thing that I'm very curious about, because the implementation in 2021, moving schools to Kellogg, which is really kind of what's motivating a lot of this right now, and the sense of urgency that I think we're all experiencing. And I haven't heard any comments on the 4 elementary schools that are going to feed into Kellogg and whether that sounds great. So I'm assuming that people are pretty comfortable with those 4 schools moving to Kellogg.
I have to say that I agree with Elizabeth, and to me, it feels like this is a foregone conclusion. However many proposals there are, 3 is what my wife could come up with. And all 3 end up with Tabor feeding into Madison, which is, in my eyes, completely unacceptable.
if you access the map, there's a proposal 1A that doesn't do that. It keeps the boundary where Franklin was with that area moving into Franklin. But this was, you know, for the purpose of feedback, it's almost easier to get feedback on one map because you can really see what people are responding to, what resonates with them. And I haven't heard a lot of resonation here tonight, I have to say. But I have heard very clearly that people aren't happy from the southeast corner of Lent to the end of the boundary in the southwest corner of the southeast. And I wish I could defend it, but I can't. I can't. And so I'll be quiet right now.
I think one of the things that you could tell probably a little bit from what Andrew just shared is that the coalition has wrestled with a lot of these same ideas or different ideas, but really has been struggling with where to go with some of these. So some of those themes that have come up, I put them up on the screen. I don't know how small it is on your computers. And if it looks like I'm looking off away from you all, it's just because I have 2 monitors set up. So just letting people know that I am watching all of you. I'm trying to manage a couple different screens so we can keep notes of everything. So I heard people earlier speak really to the need to limit transportation impacts. And I'm curious if there's anything, as parents are sitting here, families are sitting here, that also really resonates as important in these decision-making processes. As just another thought. So continue, people can share their comments and thoughts and ideas, but I also wanted to share these and see if that triggers additional opinions or thoughts as the coalition looks to grapple with these big issues.
I think a clear theme here is this whole co-locating and moving and segregation. I mean, that's just astounding to me, honestly, that PPS could overlook that when they're trying to address equity and inclusion and social justice. I just do not understand how that happened. But transportation, walkability, neighborhood schools, communities, that's what I think, what I've been hearing from the parents here across the board, which I feel really strongly about. And, you know, if my kid has, or, you know, if they're at a high school that's 4 miles away across a major highway, and, you know, we're working parents, we can't, I mean, how are we, that, I just don't even understand how that is supposed to be an acceptable experience when Franklin is walkable within a half a mile from our house. But the other piece is, you know, I think you've been hearing it, inclusion in the process, people's voices, understanding what people want their kids' lives to be, you know, the Bridger community and the taking that program out of Bridger. I just don't understand. I loved the comments around, you know, we're better together. It's true. So I think this equity question and how these proposals are actually solving the social justice and equity issues, I don't see it in these proposals, and it's not also explained. And then the other thing is I don't really understand how these which elementary schools feed into Kellogg, these 4 schools. I have an inkling, just because of this group of parents that I've been trying to understand all these issues and looking at all the maps and all this information in the last 4 days. There's something in that decision that does impact and make a case for the phase 2 decisions about boundary changes. I don't understand exactly what it is, and I know other people know more about this, but I want to understand how this decision about how the decision around Kellogg, which I understand they need to open it, but how does that decision impact? It needs to be divorced from the decision in phase 2 about what happens to Glencoe, Mount Tabor, you know, where all these other schools go. We cannot have this decision impacting a future decision, because we're all catching up, and it's a pandemic, and we're friggin' exhausted, and it's stressful.
I'd like to mention, just because the slides on the screen, this plan fails almost every single one of these themes. I mean, it just going from the second one down, leaving the first one to whether or not that is actually true. Starting with the second one, if you're saying that focus options create inequity of experience, then deciding to segregate all of the DLIs into schools, doesn't that do the exact same thing? And then, different definitions of demographic equity, that doesn't really mean anything other than people disagree about it. But then next is like, you want to avoid high school overcrowding. But as the chat is showing clearly, like this doesn't address overcrowding at Franklin. Needing to limit transportation impacts, except we're going to make students all over go significantly farther to school. Like, we're talking about K-5 students having to go miles farther to school than before. And then, the next one, we need to consider the effects of relocating the CSS program, but that hasn't even been done. It's just sort of like, oh, we'll just put a pin in it. We'll just put a pin in that and come back to it after the proposal's been approved in phase 2. And then, wanting to avoid using portable classrooms. If the numbers in the committee's baseline assessment are correct, there are almost certainly more Chinese DLI students who will forecasted to be in the program that would be in Bridger than Bridger can hold without portables. And so it's like you're creating these situations where you would have to do it, and it makes no sense unless there's like some malicious spirit involved saying, do this so we can kill the DLIs.
I was wondering, I wanted to ask, why was scenario 11 considered a no-go when it seemed to meet most goals that were set forth in strategy and execution and used a universal RESJ lens? Do you know why that was taken off the table?
Well, scenario 11 was put, am I muted? I'm sorry.
No,
You're good.
You aren't.
You're good, Andrew.
Scenario 11 was advanced on last Thursday's meeting. It was advanced again at last minute. Scenario 9 and 10 were also advanced for vote at last minute without anyone really knowing what was coming their way. In fact, scenario 10 that you're looking at tonight there was kind of an odd consensus process, and it had I think it was a total of 6 or 7 people who voted for it. There may have been a 6 additional who said there were issues with it, but they wouldn't stand in its way. And that's out of a committee of 55 or so, maybe more people. So that's why that note is in the district put that note in there. 11 was advanced at the last minute, and I'd have to open my map here and take a quick look at it. But there were some issues with the flow of 11 that people weren't really feeling like they had the time to discuss or work on. So I don't think that it's a good question. I mean, there are so many maps for one group of people to have looked at, and I think it was Tolly who was saying, asking about the why for some of the decisions. The why is missing when we see some of the changes that we get. So I don't have a good answer. Is really, it may be, and it may be better than some and not as good as others, but I don't think any of the maps that we're seeing are really resolved at this point.
We still have about 100 people here, and I want to make sure, especially if you're a parent that's been wanting to voice something and you haven't had a chance, I want to make sure that pause for just a second, and if you want to jump in the conversation, and again, continue to appreciate people posting in the chats and etc. But I just want to make that pause too if you haven't had a chance to speak.
I wanted to mention, so we're part of the dual language program, and so with dual language programs, it's for anybody in the Portland School District, and so we're actually in Southwest, and so we've been making the commute over to the east side, southeast to get to schools, and now we have to even go far. So it seems like if it's a program that has everybody involved, you know, from all
Amy, I think we lost you mid-sentence. Feel free to jump back in.
Sorry, I'm pretty much done. That's all I was trying to say is that I know it's a privilege to be in a dual language program, but you know, it also gives us equality of being in different groups. I like that, but it seems like we're getting shipped off to the far part of the city.
Do we have any Creston and Marysville, Lent, or Arleta parents here that would want to chime in?
So I'm a Creston parent. Hi. Yeah, you know, there's a lot of bigger issues in the room, but I just want to say that, you know, it's really important for Creston parents that Kellogg remains on target, as does Franklin, as they all have historically. I know that there were some of the pattern, maybe there was like one out of the how many umpteenth patterns that had Creston not doing that, but it's important for Creston to stay as is, as well as, you know, we'll take any more boundary we can. We're a very lightly enrolled school and we welcome diversity. We have such a great community and, you know, we just want more. It's my views.
I'm also a Creston parent, and my biggest concern, just selfishly, is that we don't want to lose our eastern boundary. So the proposal extends us to the north, but cuts us off to the east, which really affects our demographics. And from what I've seen from the surveys, parents across the board don't want to lose their neighborhood schools. They don't want to have to switch schools. They want to go to the school they were expecting to go to. That's true, it looks like, across demographics. So that seems like an equity issue, if that's what people are saying that they need. I mean, it's certainly what I want for my family, but I think it's what we see lots of families wanting. And then beyond just what I want selfishly, I'm not really clear how the proposals meet the goals. I wish that was spelled out a little more clearly. I don't have anything against portable classrooms. I don't really understand why that is a goal. I think we want our schools to be well resourced. We want people to be able to go to schools close to their homes if possible. Like, some of the issues are clear to me, but some of them are just like, I just don't understand. Overcrowding is an issue, clearly. That part of rebalancing makes sense to me, but I don't understand how the proposals are supposedly meeting equity goals. I feel like I want that spelled out a little bit more for me, because it's important, but I don't understand the proposal.
I had a wondering about, I'm a Bridger parent, and I just had a wondering about the last time, because this isn't the first time we've gone K8, K5. This is like multiple iterations of this. What did we learn from the last time that we did this that can glean some form of understanding that will lessen the burden of what is taking place? We understand that there are challenges in all these decisions. We understand that it's a gift to be able to open up Kellogg. Like, that's a really good thing. And I think when we move into our I, me, my, it gets difficult. And that's where the work is, as in my case, a white parent in a DLI school. And it's a privilege for me to be and have kids in the DLI. And it's not all about DLI, but I definitely think we need to be challenging ourselves to think about, in different ways, what have we learned from the past times that we've done this? The boundaries that were set last time, I think, we're not necessarily on the up and up either. So what is it that we're going to do this time that will actually level the playing field in a way that is meaningful? And my wonderings are, did any of the scenarios include lower enrollment for Franklin in any way, when we know that Cleveland will be at 70 or 87% ad nauseum? Can we have some sister school agreement like they did for Lincoln and Wilson for enrollment too, because that's what's going to end up happening. So if we know these things, how can we do different? How can we do better for our kids? Because I'm thinking now here in this moment, but I'm also thinking how this goes forward in time. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of questions about Marshall, and that seems like that's way, way off the table. But I wonder about the how and the like big picture 50 years from now. What are we going to look like? Thank you.
So I just wanted to respond to a couple questions and realize some people may be popping off at some point to go tend to their lives. So I wanted to make sure we have 3 meetings in December with the Guiding Coalition. And then obviously there's a ton of information on that website, but we wanted to make sure that everybody here knows the link to click on, and I put it in the chat as well to provide more comments. So feel free to start filling that out now. Feel free to continue the conversation, but I wanted to make sure in case somebody needs to leave a few minutes early that they have that link. And I'll put it in the chat again just one more time, so it's easy to find.
I'm a freshman at Franklin right now, and I had no idea that this boundary change and that I could be potentially transferring schools in the next couple of years. And I think that right now we need to spread more awareness to the students, because they are the ones that will be affected the most. And none of my friends know about it. Like, I don't know, I'm the only one that knows about it probably right now. And I just think that we need to spread more awareness to the kids, because they will be affected the most, and they should have a say in the proposals and what's going to happen to them, because it's going to affect them the most.
Thank you. I appreciate hearing from a student. And the chat and the video for all the breakouts are all shared. They're all saved. They'll all be part of the public documents related to this meeting and the proposals. And then the coalition will be using this feedback as well to form how we look at future scenarios. So I know it always seems like in these processes, does parent voice matter? Is anybody listening? And I know we're doing our best to capture every piece of feedback that you're sharing, and we'll take it back to the coalition. And that's part of why we want to have a record of the chat and of the video, so we could go back in and review if we missed things.
Can I add something really quick?
Yes.
So, they're talking about this. They're saying it's a proposal. Normally, when there's a proposal for the PPS, it's already done. Normally, they're just trying to sell us out this idea of it. What more likely is going to happen, and I've been talking to several parents. Some of them, they're going to pull them out of the schools. Like, I got a parent that's going to move them to Clackamas. We're actually thinking of moving our kids to Clackamas. So it's already low on enrolling already in a lot of schools. Some of them, they're overcrowded, but in reality, they're kind of underenrolled. They're not enrolling too many. Well, this is going to make it worse, because people are going to make sense of what's best for them, know what's best for PPS. That's all I got for now.
I have to agree, because the more and more I hear about this, the more I'm considering St. Mary's for high school.
That's what my wife said. Maybe go to Clackamas. Let's move to Clackamas, she said.
It's so unfortunate, because we have to people are thinking of uprooting their lives to provide their children and their families with a good life and a good education and a walk, being in a community. To me, it's just, honestly, it's devastating to hear that when it's working for these families. And that's not small. I just want to say, these are our lives. All of these people on this, there's how many of these Zoom channels have 100 and something people on them right now? And we're all feeling powerless in a city and in a world in which so much is out of our control. So much is out of our control, especially this year. And our kids in their communities and in, with our families and our friends and our schools, it's honestly, it feels criminal to me that PPS has operated in this way when we need some stability. And yes, we need to address a lot of these issues, but in the way in which you're doing it, it needs to be slowed down and it needs to be inclusive if we're really going to address equity and social justice and racial justice and all of those things which are critical, as we all know and believe. But inclusion, I mean, I think that's the word of the freaking day. Inclusion in this process. Slow it down, make sure the voices are heard, make sure families are not uprooting and have to move away, or I can't send my kids to private school. So do I have to sell my house and try to figure out where I'm going? No, thank you. Do the right thing, PPS.
I would like to add to that. We support our public school. We rent a house in our neighborhood so that we can go to this school because of the culture. I'm an Atkinson parent, because of the culture that the school has developed and because it feels like a safe neighborhood that our child can walk to school in at some point when she's older than first grade. But if this is a conversation of equity and we're talking about people feeling like they have to put their kids in a private school to get these needs met, that's not equity. And I feel like geographical location has to be a part of the conversation when it concerns equity, because shouldn't everybody be able to feel like they have a community that they live near and that they have people that they live near that they can rely on? And if you're dragging people all over the city so they can get their needs met, I don't feel that that's it. And I also don't think that anything on the list is being addressed. I just want to make sure that I say that out loud. Like none of these concerns that are on the list are really getting addressed. And I don't see the data that the school district has used to come to some of these conclusions. I'm not seeing where this information is coming from. I want to know why it's not being made available to parents. I also want to understand why the communication has been so low and the communication has not been put out in the languages that these language strand programs that are in Speak Of are that we're even talking about. The language translation for tonight was available, but like ahead of time, things just weren't even communicated. There were things being shown up at the last second. I just don't think that the reasons that this conversation is happening are really the reasons that it's happening, and it hasn't been clear or concise or available to parents in any way. And then lastly, my personal gripe is that I can see my school from my driveway, and now I'm being told that I have to take my kid 3 miles away to a neighborhood that I'm not a part of and I don't know anybody in, where, on the other side of one street lies all of her community. And that's not feeling equitable to me at all. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
I was just talking to my wife. She's on the Spanish, one of the Spanish channels. She's saying that a couple parents, it never done to me. They said they're trying to make it look like California, San Francisco. They're trying to segregate all the schools. They're trying to put the Hispanics here, the African Americans over here, the the Asians on this side. That's what they're trying to do. So my suggestion, don't let them. We cannot let them do segregation. I'm sorry.
Hey, Elisa, can you just briefly tell us kind of when the idea for this process started, or like, was the initial intention like we have Kellogg, we need to balance it, and how, like, just maybe give me a brief, like, how did this start and when did it start?
That's a great question, because I know it started actually before the pandemic. And so let me look for one thing so I don't give you the wrong information. And I'll let the conversation continue. I did want to remind people, or let people know, that I appreciate whoever noticed that the Google link wasn't working. So that should be working now. And the chat is part of the public record. So if for some reason you do have a concern about your privacy, please let me know and we'll figure out how to fix that. So, and you can do that through privately chatting with me, so you don't have to share that with everybody. I will look for the answer and let the conversation continue.
I can quickly say that this started with a board resolution asking for, redistricting and boundary changes to deal with some of the overcrowding needs. It did change as COVID hit. It is also certainly being driven by Kellogg. And one thing I would also say is, as we look at the district and what they're doing, the board is ultimately going to be the ones that are making the decision. I think as citizens, it is important to understand that the board of directors for PPS are the decision makers in this. And it is the district that will be making a recommendation on which proposal or what proposal to advance to the board.
Can I jump in really quickly? This is Andrew Scott. I'm a PPS board member, and I really appreciate the conversation. And although it's been hard to get through all 300 or more comments in the chat, I think I've gotten through them all, and I've taken a lot of notes. I did want to address, I think Benjamin raised it, but a number of parents have raised it in the chat as well. I just want to say there's not a preordained outcome for this process, or I guess maybe another way to put it, if there is one, no one's told me about it. So, and I'm one of the 7 votes that Andrew was just mentioning, on the board. So it is intended to be an open process. It started a long time ago with the knowledge of Kellogg, but also the need for all districts have to do rebalancing, right? Schools don't move, but people move, and neighborhoods move, and populations within cities move. And so it's a pretty normal process that we have to go through every few years, but it can also be very disruptive. I will say, as a board member, and I think I can speak on behalf of all 7 of us unanimously, our goal is to create, has been to create, and still is to create an open and inclusive process. I am hearing loud and clear the frustration of folks on this call in terms of not being included, and when they were included, and the amount of information. And I know board members are on in most of these rooms tonight, so I think we're probably all hearing very similar things, and that will have an impact. Another decision, just so folks know, when we originally considered this, we talked about doing boundary changes district-wide. And really the decision was that logistically that is almost an impossible lift. And so that's the reason why we sort of broke it down into these phases over the next few years. But we also recognize those phases cause their own issues, because those areas of the city are not necessarily confined, and what happens in one area impacts others. So we are aware that that's a huge challenge, and I know some parents have raised that as well. I'm going to put in the chat my email, which you can find on the website, but you can feel free to email me. You can feel free to email any of the board members as well as we go through this process. But I also want to appreciate the coalition members who've been putting a lot of work on this, and thanks for that work as well. I'll be quiet. I wasn't even planning to talk tonight, but I just wanted to jump in on that.
Thank you.
I just wanted to mention, I think you made an excellent point, is that redistricting, rebounding, changing the feeds and all these things is going to have winners and losers no matter what. There's always going to be part of that process, and there's always going to be frustrations associated with that. I think one of the key things that's happened here that is separate from that normal kind of discussion is the impact that's being had on programs like CSS and the DLI programs in particular being segregated off and separated out from the rest of the communities in which they're co-located right now. And that being set as a goal for PPS, I think feels really problematic for a lot of people, especially people who are native speakers who want to be part of the communities. It feels to me like one of the goals of two-way immersion has always been to integrate communities of non-native English speakers with English speakers and bring them closer together. And as we segregate those programs and push them further outside the city and further away from neighborhood programs, we're working against the entire goal of the program. That, for example, and I'm speaking as a Woodstock parent who's got a kid in both neighborhood and DLI, you know, we're going to spend 20 years trying to integrate those communities together. And neighborhood schools are part of that. Neighborhood programs are part of that. That's what normalizes that process and makes it not an ESL program, but really a two-way immersion program that really has an impact that spreads throughout the community. And I think by bringing those all together and having multilingual segregated schools outside of those communities is not driving what anybody wants in terms of diversity or inclusion. I really feel very strongly that is really at the core of the problem with this decision-making process is really the damage being done to those successful programs.
You know, I just want to quickly say that I am hearing a lot about DLI, and I do have a child in a DLI program. And when we enrolled in DLI, DLI was driven at 50% native English speakers and 50% native Spanish speakers were in a Spanish DLI. And of course, that would apply to any other language. The rationale that we have heard on the Guiding Coalition behind locating all the DLI programs in one location is that there's research that says the students do better. And when I say the students, I mean non-native English speakers. So the idea is that by creating a stronger program, by locating those strands together, that the students, the program is stronger because they can lean on each other, on each strand, which is each kind of group of grades that goes through a school, to help and support should there be problems, should there be behavioral issues, if a kid needs to be moved to a different strand, things like that. And there's also now an emphasis more on bringing those DLI programs to communities where there's a larger percentage of non-native English speakers so that they have the opportunity to learn, because there's evidence that shows that if you are a Spanish speaker, that you have a better chance of moving ahead in programs like language arts if you start learning in your native language. I can say that we had an awesome experience in a single strand program at Atkinson. And as I think people from the LENC community have been very clear about, they're not necessarily interested in turning that school into an whole Spanish speaking school. And I think that is something that we're hearing as the coalition, though it isn't represented in the map that was presented to you all. That's it.
I thought that the reason for locating languages under the same roof is because students test better in their own language, and it was only for the test scores. That's the impression that I was getting.
When we
Go ahead.
In Spanish, our child was a bilingual speaker living in the United States. My wife is from Ecuador, and my child grew up speaking bilingually. On my wife's side of the family, nobody wanted her in a DLI program because her English would not be as good by the time she got to 5th grade as it would if she was in an all English program. For the DLI speakers, it really is that, you know, when those programs start, they start 90% in Spanish in kindergarten and 10% in English, which gives children who aren't native English speakers a real opportunity to embrace the English language and learn some of the core subject matters, understanding it. So if you're learning math in 1st grade, as an English speaker, as a Spanish speaker listening to math in English, then it may be harder to get it if your mastery of the English language isn't quite where it will be in a few years. So I think that's the motivation behind it. And I know that people have spoken that maybe there's a greater issue going on, and test scores are always relevant in the district and certainly shouldn't be discounted. I'm not trying to say that test scores aren't important, especially in terms of the politics of schools. But I think there's some real rationale to it. But again, we've heard very strongly from everyone here tonight that they would prefer to try to keep the DLI programs in the schools and as part of alongside neighborhood programs.
I appreciate all of that. You know, one of the things that I find is you can find research to back up pretty much anything you want to back up, right? And so there's going to be research that backs up just about anything that anybody wants to make a decision on. And so I just want to make sure that the decisions that are being made are actually taking into consideration the real solutions that need to be created. You know, that's where I'm falling into sort of disrepair around this whole thing, is just like, what problem are we trying to solve? And, you know, and when we look at, like we've said over and over and over again, when we look at the problems that are trying to be solved, this doesn't solve those problems. And so I'm wondering if we are holding a hammer right now and looking around for nails. And that's what it seems like. And so I just want to be loud and clear about where I feel the solutions are. And that is, what is successful? What can we do to replicate that in other schools? And what can we do to make sure that we maintain community in Portland? That is what Portland needs. And especially, and I hate to say it with the pandemic, but with the pandemic especially, we're crumbling as a society. We are being isolated. And these kids, I mean, I've got a 14 and a 12-year-old son, or 14, 12-year-old sons who are desperately isolated from their friends and are so looking forward to going back to school. And they didn't realize how much they love school. And the reason they love school is because of their community. And so I want to make sure we are solving the right problems. And it, to me, just does not seem like we're looking for solutions to the problems that actually exist. And so, you know, when we're looking for research, you know, folks, tell me whatever research you want me to find and I'll find it. I'll even fabricate it, as most people will, right? But it's just like, we can find research to support just about anything we want to state, you know? And I'd say that after 25 years in education, you know, I've been an educator for a long time. And I've seen these things. I've seen this process. And I've been through redistricting, and I've seen how it's destroyed communities when we've done it, when it's not done mindfully. You know, and I'll give some space here. I'll stop talking, but that's just where I am.
Thank you. Nellie, did you have something you wanted to add?
Oh, sorry. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to say how very important it is to have a multicultural school. And I'm living evidence of that because my parents are from China. They moved to Honduras, you know, a long time ago, and that's where I was born. And throughout my life, from baby to 4 years old, I only spoke Cantonese only. They put me to a school where it's bilingual, and they spoke Spanish and English. And my friends who are also Chinese, who also their only language was Chinese, they have a really, really hard time in school. They struggle in school because they went from Chinese to here, learn English and Spanish, you know. And I think it's really, really important to have a, you know, have a class where the languages are combined. That way, native speakers get a chance to keep up with the other classes. All my friends that were native speakers, they were left behind. They were left a grade behind because of that, because they couldn't speak English very well. And you know, and I'm pointing out to, you know, the previous commenters that have really, really great points, because I think that kids, the native speaker kids, would benefit a lot if they learn from their counterparts, their English speaking friends. Anyways, that's my comment.
Thank you, Nellie.
It's segregation. segregation, and they don't want to say it.
I think if you're creating programs where when you sit and look at a classroom and everybody in the classroom fits into one national stereotype, then you have a problem. And it sounds like they're trying to push, you know, non-English speakers out of, you know, the neighborhoods where they don't live. I don't know how to put it in a way that doesn't offend anybody or makes it sound, I'm not as well educated in this as I should be, but it feels like they're just trying to push these kids to the edges of the city. And I don't think that that helps anybody. And I'll shut up now.
We are a little past time, but I wanted to make sure that people have the survey again if you need to leave. And I figure we can stay open for maybe 5 or 10 more minutes to hear, especially if if you have a comment that hasn't been shared or you're from a school that hasn't been represented tonight. And again, all of our notes, the recording of this session and the chat get saved and posted and are part of where we go from here. So I appreciate people's feedback. I really appreciate the conversation tonight. I appreciate our student that came on. Thank you so much. With that, I'll stop talking as well and keep listening.
I'm a parent of kids at Glencoe and a parent of a child at Mount Tabor. And I guess I know I may be redundant in saying this, but I can't stress enough the, you know, what everybody has been going through this year with COVID and how it has affected our kids. And, you know, we talk a lot about, you know, synchronous learning and keeping our kids engaged socially. And it's just been an absolute abhorrent struggle for everyone through this whole ordeal. And the fact that PPS is in the middle, in the throes of really not valuing the input from the beginning of this process by not including people and continuing to push this process forward in light of what every family is going through. And then the other thing I'd mention is that, you know, I really can't stress the importance of our community and what, you know, every family, the amount of time that they take out of their day. You know, we're a two-person working household. We're in a lucky situation. There's two parents. Not everyone is in that position, but every minute of our time is put into our local school, fixing the grounds, coaching, all these things. And then when you break those links and, you know, destroy those connections within your local community and force kids to go to high school at a school far away, and then you have to figure out the logistics of getting them there. And, well, can I attend their band practice now that's late at night? And you've got multiple kids. I'm just not certain that PPS is taking into any of these really important things into consideration. And especially if we're not really dealing with any of the issues that are, you know, that we're trying to address. You know, let's put our energy where it needs to be. And I think we voted for bond measures over and over again. We need to just, I've heard it before, is put our energy in things that work and not destroy things that are completely functioning.
I'd like to just briefly echo something I saw in the comments about improving schools as they are in terms of curriculum. It sounds like a lot of folks are stressed out about curriculum changing because the DLIs are moving and such. And I'm fully unconnected to the DLI situation. I'm a Sunnyside parent, and we have our own curriculum that has been pretty phenomenal for years now. And so the idea that maybe if a lot of these opportunities could be replicated in other schools, as opposed to like, well, this is a great school and this is just a neighborhood school. And well, can't that neighborhood school, what if we hired, more DLI type stuff? I mean, this is terribly naive, and I'm an educator through the arts. So I suppose I should have more understanding of the situation than I do, but I don't. And so the whole idea that like, can't we just replicate a lot of these good things? Is there a way to do that? I understand that there's many layers to this. One of them is the overcrowding. That situation sounds really hard, and I don't envy anyone trying to fix that. But the idea that people are saying, well, now I'm going to have to move schools because you guys screwed up our school. Isn't there a way to like just maintain the awesomeness of your school by bringing in those programs? Like, what's stopping us from recreating some GLIs in other schools that don't have them? Or what's stopping people from doing the curriculum that Sunnyside has, or that Creative Sciences has? And I know that's a lot of curriculums to work with, but I think just in terms of everyone saying, man, our school is totally screwed now, it sounds like people are fighting each other's schools, and that's not a good situation. So maybe there's a way we could add to the schools that seem to be suffering. I know that's not on everyone's the top of budgetary lists, but anyways, just I saw that in the comments, thinking let's just make things better for everybody if possible. But we still have to move kids around. That's a fact. I mean, if the schools are overcrowded and it's unsafe for whatever reason, that's another layer that has to be dealt with. Anyways.
I wanted to share something that I heard in I was in the South Tabor Neighborhood Coalition meeting the other night. One of the people there said at the end of the meeting, as we were discussing this, and it was passionate, and people like in this meeting were very upset with what was presented and not understanding the why, which I think is what the problem statement is and what the whys are kind of what I hear people not really understanding, or we don't understand enough or at all in order to share it with you. But a guy there said, at the end of the meeting, he said, I went through this redistricting and my kids moved from Atkinson out to where Creative Science is, back to homeschooling, then eventually landed at Franklin. And he said, the one thing that I can say is, despite all of that, they got a great education. And the one thing I hope everyone keeps in mind is that this is about the kids. This is about education. This is about providing them with the best opportunities they can get for the future. And sometimes we can get in our own way, and that's not in defense of this process or in defense of what was presented tonight, but in a time where it is scary, and it is a scary time in the world today, things like this, I think, can help spin things a little bit further. But as long as we focus on quality schools and have great teachers, the kids, as long as they got that opportunity, there's a better chance of success.
I will say I'm a Creston parent, so this feeder pattern works well for us. But I just think that I hear that people really feel like they've been left out of this conversation, even though, Creston has been kind of in this conversation from the beginning because it's all been about Kellogg. But I'm really worried about Franklin over enrollment, and someone has to go somewhere else. So I'm wondering kind of if this can be, I know that there's different phases, but I really do wonder if the second phase can be drawn out more to really take in, a lot more perspectives. The whole language immersion, I don't agree with what PPS wants to propose, but I'm not in one, so I won't even touch that. But I will say the whole thing with neighborhoods, I really do feel like I worry that the folks that are really against the boundary changes, the most vocal ones are a lot of the inner Southeast white families who have the ability, right, to go somewhere else, to go just that extra half mile or mile. And I really like looking at Kellogg's boundaries. I was surprised and encouraged that they are taking in kids that are kind of further out rather than just directly around Kellogg. So I feel like that will create more diversity for Kellogg rather than just the couple neighborhoods that are right around Kellogg. And so I actually was pretty pleased to see that. The other point that I will say is that we will probably be getting changed from our Creston to our Lida if boundaries go according to the last map that was put out. And I think that's just one of those things that we're all going to have to be redistricted a little bit. And I feel like it's just one of those things that we have to look at that bigger picture to make sure that kids from kind of outer Southeast are able to, that we're able to like encompass all of those socioeconomic neighborhoods rather than just focusing on kind of the same socioeconomic neighborhoods going to the same schools that they've always been feeding into. So I know that I'm coming from, we still get to go to Franklin, even if our elementary school changes, but I feel like, it's a good opportunity for all of us because we are wanting to make these schools better, that we can really put that in. I mean, I get it. We can't actually, my kids were a little too far from Creston for them to walk to their school. So I hear the neighborhood part about, not being able to bike there, but we still get our kids there. We're still part of the school. So I think we can look kind of a little bit beyond the neighborhoods and kind of go for the better schools for equity are my 2 cents for this.
Thank you. I said I'd close this at 8:20, but I do want to just double check that people have had a chance before, so it abruptly ends, that they've had a chance, especially if you haven't spoken tonight and still would like to speak, or to get your last idea or thought into the chat so we can make sure that it's captured.
I had one last thing to say, and thinking practically, how, in my case, my child will have to take 2 buses to get to Madison. Now, how does making my child get up an hour or more earlier every day help her with her education? Just my 2 cents there.
I just want to throw, I'm a Creston parent. I also would love to know more about the why, and maybe it's on the website, and we all are, working and doing schooling at home and have a lot going on. So I think it's pretty clear from this conversation that people want to understand more of the why and how the proposals are moving us towards equity goals. And I also would just want to, and maybe the data says that with the dual language immersion, that it's better to be one way, but we hear from all community, because rightfully so, this open house has been broken up by language, which therefore we kind of have, similar people talking and with similar values and similar lived experiences. So it'd be nice to hear the conversations that are happening in some of those other rooms, so that we can understand what other folks, what their values are. And like people from Lentz, I didn't hear anyone from Lentz, like, are they happy about having the opportunity to go to Kellogg? Is that a great opportunity for them? Or are they concerned about transportation? Because I know as a working parent, for me, being able to let my kid walk to school is an amazing opportunity, and helps me manage my work and life and all of that good stuff. And so, but maybe that's less important. And obviously everybody's different, but I just am curious how others that have different perspectives and lived experiences are viewing the proposals, because I certainly am open to giving something up if it's getting to that goal. And I would love if PPS had more resources to have all these great programs everywhere. Like, that would be great. where do we advocate, like, let's do that. But I also don't want to use that as an excuse as to why I personally can't give something up in order to get to those equity goals as well. And thank you for hosting this tonight.
Thank you, Leah. I think that's probably a great place for us to end tonight. I think with that, you will be able to go back on the website. We've done a few both surveys and focus groups leading up to tonight, and all of those, I think, I do apologize for the hundreds of pages of documents, but all of those comments are there, so you can go through and try to get the perspective of other schools and other communities, as well as all the breakout rooms tonight, including the language specific ones, will have their video posted and their content posted in the chat as well, so that you get a chance to kind of not only see what your perspective is, what you're hearing from friends and neighbors and others at your school, but hear that perspective from other schools as well. So with that, if you have anything last to put in the chat before I find the magical button to close this, I really appreciate your time. I know people are nervous sometimes if this goes anywhere, if we're really listening, and I always do my best, and I believe that those who set up this process really did with that intent to listen tonight. So thank you for your time. I know many of you are probably coming off a long day and have another one tomorrow. So thank you. I appreciate everybody being here. And thank you, Andrew.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Elisa. Thanks,
Thank
Andrew.
you, Isaac.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, everyone. And if the chat's open, if you are one of the schools that's going to Kellogg, I don't feel like we heard from very many people. So if it's good, love to hear that too.
All right. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Night.